Hello everyone, welcome once again to the next segment of the revision series. Now see, as we are getting closer to the month of the examination, right, the news that we will see is mostly follow up from what we have seen, right, or what we have been following in the newspaper. Now for all the viewers who have been consistently watching the newspaper series, you will find the revision series just a mere skimming over whatever the newspapers had. All right, so let's dive into the April month on its own had very little from the perspective of probable news, right? This was the month when the COVID-19 second wave was at its peak, right? India recorded the highest number of deaths and cases on a per day basis in this month, right? Now, however, based on that, see, we may not get questions directly related to the spike in the number of cases, right? But we may get questions about the policies surrounding COVID and what were the events around it. So we have been noting down the vaccines that have been approved. We have noted down the different solutions that the government has come up. In the newspaper series, we have talked about the vaccine policies also, all right? However, the daily number of cases is not that important. So the first news that makes an important one is that this was also the month related to the assembly elections that were going on in 4 states and 1 union territory. So who was at helm during these elections? It was the new chief election commissioner, that is Sushil Chandra, former chairman of the Central Board of Direct Taxes, Sushil Chandra. So election commission has 1 chief election commissioner and 2 election commissioners. All 3 of them are selected through the same mechanism. What is the mechanism? The government, that is the union government, advises the president and the president finally appoints them, right? So it's a constitutional position. However, the tenure is 6 years or 65 years of age, whatever is earlier, all right? Now recently, the reason why we also need to talk about it is because recently the Supreme Court has admitted a petition regarding why the election commission and the chief election commissioners themselves should not be appointed by a panel similar to the CBI. The CBI director is selected through a panel of the Prime Minister and the Chief Justice along with the leader of opposition in the Lok Sabha. So it's a balanced committee that decides. However, the election commissioner can be appointed by the government. So he can be the government appointee particularly. During the second wave, there were allegations of partisanship regarding decision making of the election commission. All right, so that is one of the reasons when the Supreme Court admitted the petition, okay? But as of now, it is a purely government appointed position, even though the election commissioner itself is a constitutional body, okay? Then, on 1st April 2021, the RBI and the Monetary Policing Committee, all right, they kept the inflation target to 2 to 6% with 4% as the ideal one, all right? Now, we have noted down inflation is at record high right now in the economy. Wholesale price index is hovering above 12%, all right? However, the RBI, which has, so the MPC has 3 RBI members plus 3 government members along with the RBI governor within it, all right? However, right now, the RBI is keeping up with its accommodative stand of cheap credit. Why do we say so? So the MPC can be influenced by multiple tools. Last year in CLAT examination also, you got one question related to one of the MPC tools, that is open banking operation or open market operations of the RBI. What does the RBI do? Or what is MPC's purpose? It is to ensure liquidity in the market, right? What is the state of money supply in the economy? Right now, the RBI is maintaining an accommodative stand and using an expansionary monetary stand. What does this mean? This means that the RBI wants people to spend. That credit should be cheap. Right now, repo rate is at record low around 4%. All right, it is around 4%. So credit is very cheap. Getting a loan from the bank is very, very cheap. What this means is the government wants people to spend. It wants you to use banking channels to utilize. Why is it so? Because there is a demand gap in the economy. For the first time since 2018 onwards, Indian economy has been seeing a demand downturn. That is, people themselves are demanding less of things. When people demand less, producers are less incentivized to produce more. When producers actually reduce their production, they cut down jobs. And the COVID-19 has actually worsened the situation, wherein we have had record number of job losses. Unemployment is at record high. So what all of this is doing right now, the RBI wants for the supply side, all right, at least the supply side, that the suppliers should be incentivized to take up cheap credit so that they can invest in the business, people to take credit so that they can demand more things, all right. So that is why this accommodative stand of MPC has led to high inflation in the economy. Inflation in the economy is at record high. Now there are two other things that are also influencing inflation. Inflation on its own can be a topic from CLAT perspective in the general knowledge scheme of things. So the policy package of Government of India, what has the Government of India recently done? It has announced credit guarantee schemes. We have noted them down during the newspaper series to health sector, to education sector, to tourism sector, multiple sectors, right? So those are focused on easy credit to tide over the COVID wave. However, this has only led to expenditure in consumption sector. When you take credit to fulfill your basic needs, all right, whenever you have to repay it or whenever you start earning, the first thing that you will do is try to repay the loan, all right. And because you have to repay the loan, you will spend less on your need. Let's say you want to buy a new mobile phone, or you want to go to a new restaurant that has opened up, but right now you cannot because you have just now started earning and you have to pay back the loans that you took during the COVID-19 wave, all right. So even if, let's say, you went to the restaurant, you would have ordered ideally 4 dishes, you will end up ordering only 2. So this is the lag that the inflation will create in the economy in the long term, all right. What this is doing is it is limiting the scope for investment in the economy. Right now, Indian economy also has poor infrastructure, right? So credit should ideally be used to invest in creating long-term assets, but that is not happening, right? So this is one problem why, despite record level of cheap credit, inflation is high because money is cheap, and yet the economy is not taking up as it should. Another aspect of it is high indirect taxes in the economy. Right now, our economy also has very high indirect taxes. For example, on every 100% of fuel purchase, you are paying 67% of indirect taxes. What are indirect taxes? Indirect taxes are those that everyone has to pay. They are non-progressive taxation. Non-progressive taxation meaning that even the rich and the poor have to pay the same level of taxes. When that happens, it hurts the poor even more, all right. And when that happens, we have far more poor people in the country than we have rich people, all right. The top rich 1% in India actually owns 70% of the wealth in the country, right. So what is happening is, because the tax is hurting those who are in the 99% bracket of the population, this tax is hurting these people. And so that there has been a target missing in the government policies, all right. Therefore, right now, despite cheap credit, the surge in jobs is not happening, all right. So this is the long-term aspect. But one of the headline questions is, until 2026, the ideal inflation in the Indian economy should be 4%. We right now have 12% inflation in the economy, all right. As the time period when you will write your exams, inflation in the economy is around 12% at wholesale level, 7 to 8% at consumer level, all right. So there is a high inflation beyond the permissible limit of RBI, all right. So moving on, then is the oxygen express. You all know the country had record shortage of oxygen. All the oxygen consumption in the country was diverted towards medical oxygen. But we also have realized that we have a huge problem in the country, that oxygen is manufactured only around 3 to 4 areas centered in central eastern India or southern India. So to transport oxygen from those plants to the states where it was needed, the railway ran oxygen expresses, all right. So the first oxygen expresses ran from Delhi to Maharashtra to urban areas, all right. So these were oxygen expresses up to provide for medical oxygen to the states in need, all right. Then moving on is US John Paul Jones conducted a freedom of navigation operation around Lakshadweep Islands, all right. So this is one dispute that I had at depth explained in the newspaper analysis series, but we are covering it once again. So you all know that India is a peninsula, all right, and 200 nautical miles of our territory is our EEZ, that is exclusive economic zone. But if, for example, there is Sri Lanka here, we have other ships that may also be passing through to the Arabian Sea and then to the Strait of Hormuz and to the Suez Canal, all right. So the rule is, the law that governs the law of the seas, that is UNCLOS, all right. It governs the law of the seas. It is the international treaty. Under this, if there is a trading ship, all right, it does not need permission of the government. It has the right to safe passage. But whenever you conduct a military operation, such as the freedom of navigation operation, you need express permission of a country in whosoever economic zone you are in. USS John Paul Jones, which is a destroyer of the Navy, US Navy 7th Fleet, conducted a FONOP around Lakshadweep Islands without India's permission. So India recorded a statement. This was just after the Quad Summit, all right. So two things stand out in this. This was seen, one, the law itself, right, that for peaceful passage or naval vessels that are merchant ships or carrying goods, they require no permission of the country from which they are passing. But a military ship, if it is passing through territory, and especially if it is committing any operation, it requires express consent, all right. So this was the law. India recorded its displeasure against the US operation. That was one part of the story. The second part was that this was a posturing to China actually. The month of March and April also saw China pushing other countries in the South China Sea to state that the entire South China Sea is Chinese territory and that no country can actually pass it without the permission of the Chinese. So this event was seen as a symbol to China to claim that, see, even if it is your exclusive economic zone, it does not matter. We have the right to navigate through those areas, all right. So this was a posturing to Chinese in the South China Sea to claim that, see, this is our territory. Even if you claim it is your territory, first of all, it's not your territory, and secondly, even if it is, you cannot stop us from passing, and that this sea is not totally belonging to your territory, all right. So this was a posture towards that. The name of the ship, where the operation happened, what was the operation, what is the law, all of it we have already discussed in the newspaper series, and I have discussed it once again. Then the 2019 Dada Saheb Phalke Award was awarded to Rajnikant. The Dada Saheb Phalke Award, as you all know, is the highest film honor in the country, given for outstanding contribution for growth and development of Indian cinema. Established in 1969, the first winner was Devika Rani. Dada Saheb Phalke was the director of the first Indian feature film, that is Raja Harish Chandra, right? Then moving on is perseverance in ingenuity. NASA landed its fourth rover on Mars surface, which is known as Perseverance rover. Along with Perseverance was also a helicopter that is named Ingenuity. All right, Ingenuity is the first object made by humans to fly on another terrestrial object. So that is Ingenuity. The rover landed on Jezero crater. It is a seen or believed as an ancient lake on Martian surface. All right. Along with this, there was another scientific experiment that NASA conducted on Mars. For the first time, we generated or developed oxygen on another planet. How did we do it? It was done through MOXIE, Mars Oxygen In Situ Resource Utilization Experiment. All right. It will be doing it 2 more times on the Martian surface. Okay. It developed oxygen that would have led to a human living on Mars for 10 minutes. Okay. Then a little bit of history of Martian exploration. It was the first flyby mission through Mars. A flyby mission is very, it's like the planet is here and you pass through it. All right. So the first flyby was done by Mariner 4 of NASA in 1965. Then the first orbiter was by USSR, that is Mars 2, their second mission, and the first lander was Mars 3 in 1971 by USSR. All right. Since USSR and USA, China became the 3rd country to successfully soft land on Martian territory. All right. This was the first soft landing by Mars 3. Then the 3rd country to do it is China. All right. Now rovers, there have been 3 rovers by NASA on Mars. All right. So first was Sojourner, then Spirit, and then Opportunity. All right. So China became the 3rd country. We'll be talking about them in the May segment. All right. So this was the June where NASA launched and landed its 4th along with Ingenuity. Okay. And it also conducted another experiment to create oxygen on surface using MOXIE. All right. Then in the month of April, a special ASEAN summit took place. All right. So in November month, the formal summit of ASEAN had taken place. In backdrop of the Myanmar crisis, the coup in Myanmar, a special session of Myanmar took place, chaired by Brunei, who is one of the members of ASEAN. All right. This was to ask the military to stop the killing of protesters. Nothing has been done. The killings are still going on. All right. It was agreed by the Myanmar military. The summit was attended by General Min Aung Hlaing, who has conducted the coup in Myanmar. All right. So the ASEAN summit, at the ASEAN summit, which was chaired by Brunei, all right, in this 5 points were agreed. What were the 5 points that were agreed? Ending violence, a constructive dialogue among all parties, a special ASEAN envoy to facilitate dialogue, acceptance of aid, and a visit by envoy to Myanmar. All these 5 points were agreed by the military of Myanmar. However, no progress has been made beyond this. India, China, United States, and all the world economies have reposed their faith in the ASEAN dialogue, that ASEAN is the best forum to actually resolve the military crisis or the Myanmar crisis in general. This event of Myanmar stands out, or this special summit stands out on its own. All right. Why? Because ASEAN, unlike European Union, has a non-interference policy. That is, the world, that is the group, does not tell any of its members how it should conduct its internal affairs. Whether you want military to rule, whether you want a king to rule, none of that is the subject of ASEAN. However, the military coup in Myanmar has become violent. There is a risk of civil war. There is a risk of high refugee outtake in the country, and it can affect the economy of the entire region. And therefore, ASEAN has taken this step, moving beyond its non-interference policy. The summit had taken place in Jakarta in Indonesia, but was chaired by Brunei. So these two facts are also equally important. All right. Then moving on is the World War I massacre was recognized as a genocide. So you all know the First World War, one of the losers of the war was the Ottoman Empire of Turkey, right? Now, the current president of Turkey, that is Recep Tayyip Erdogan, he believes, or he claims to his supporters, that he is going to lead Turkey back to the heights of the Ottoman Empire. At the peak of its power, Ottoman Empire was one of the largest empires to exist on the earth. From 16th century till the early 20th century, the Ottomans were at the peak. But the empire came to an end. The crisis across the Middle Eastern countries is a follow-up from the breakdown of Ottoman Empire. The Palestinian Israel-Palestine crisis, the border crisis at Syria, all of them are a follow-up from the breakup of the Ottoman Empire. Alright. However, during the World War itself, Ottoman Empire had received a defeat in one of the battles. The king then believed, the then king of Ottoman Empire, that see, this was because of backstabbing of the Armenians in their forces. Because of this, a genocide was sanctioned by the Ottomans against the then Armenians. Alright. So this genocide has now been recognized by USA. Why is it important to be talked about? One, because it's correcting or at least owning up to your historical wrongs. And secondly, it is related to what had happened in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. In Nagorno-Karabakh, as we had discussed in the month of November, Turkey had played a significant role in ensuring the victory of Azerbaijan. Right? Azerbaijan and Turkey's relationship has become closer. Now, US and Turkey are allies in the NATO forum, right? So this is a posturing to tell Turkey that, see, you cannot choose one side over the other, that you cannot tilt totally towards Azerbaijan and reject Armenia altogether, because you have committed mistakes that the world can see, and sanctions can be imposed on you accordingly if you don't correct your measures now. All right, that if you don't correct your posturing now, things can happen later on. All right. Turkey is also embroiled in a conflict where it has agreed to purchase the S-400 from Russia. All right. Something that is barred from NATO allies cannot buy from enemies of NATO. Russia is one of the enemy of NATO or a threat. So thus this purchase and then this posturing is part of US telling Turkey that you can't tread beyond the borderline of whatever is agreed in the NATO forum. All right. So it is linked to that and thus important to be noted down. All right. Then moving on is the Press Freedom Index, one of the important index that comes out every year. India's ranking in this index shifted to the bottom 25% of the rankings. All right, India was ranked 142nd out of 180. The report is annually published by Reporters Without Border. The index measures the freedom granted to journalists in a particular country. The parameters of this also become important. What are the parameters? Pluralism. How many different opinions can you give in your country? Media independence. How free is media to report about what is happening in the country? During the COVID wave, we saw large-scale barring of journalists from reporting deaths at crematoriums. Alright, we saw underreporting by multiple states during the COVID-19 death. Then environment and self-censorship. Do you feel threatened that you can't, or there will be retribution against you if you report a similar or something against the government? So that is known as self-censorship. Then legislative framework. Is the law strong enough to support the journalist? Transparency, infrastructure and abuse. In infrastructure such as internet access, access to electricity, and then abuse. Does the law abuse its power to actually stop the media from reporting? The country that topped the index for the 4th year in consecution was Norway. North Korea is at the last, and China features at 177. All right. Then, in person in news was Duke in Edinburgh, who was the husband of the now Queen of England, that is Queen Elizabeth II. Why do we need to talk about him? Not only because he was the husband of Queen Elizabeth, but also because he was a chief guest at the Republic Day parade in 1959. All right. This year at 2021, we did not have any chief guest at the Republic Day parade. if we were to have a guest, we would have had the guest from United Kingdom itself, right? And he was the guest that we hosted at the 1959 Republic Day parade way back in 1959. Okay, so it's interlinked to that, and thus we need to talk about it. Then this April was also the month when the talks regarding the JCPOA resumed in Vienna. Right now at July month, the talks have been stalled. No progress have really been made. Both the parties, that US and Iran, want the talks to go ahead and finally resolve the dispute. So what was the JCPOA? Throughout the newspaper series, we have talked about it multiple times. It was an agreement of Iran along with P5+1, that is the permanent 5 nations of Security Council along with Germany, which meant Iran will stop its nuclear enrichment program, development of nuclear weapons. It will allow IAEA to conduct inspections. However, in 2018, Donald Trump unilaterally abandoned the deal and imposed sanctions on Iran. Since then, the Iranian economy has been crumbling. Countries cannot purchase oil from Iran except China, which has disobeyed the sanctions. No other country wants to antagonize the US, right? But in 2021, the talks have begun again. Joe Biden, the new president, has been welcoming of JCPOA. He was the vice president when the agreement was first reached. All right. However, because the talks have not progressed as they should have, in July 2021, this month, all right, the month of your examination, CLAT has, Iran has declared that it will stop the International Atomic Energy Agency from conducting inspections of its nuclear facilities. All right. So inspection is the first mechanism to actually see whether a country is really possessing nuclear weapons or not. So JCPOA is an important topic. The month of June was when Iranian presidential elections also took place, which we will talk about. Then the UN population report also came out in the month of April. It is annually published. This year's report's title was My Body is My Own. It talked about bodily autonomy. April month was also the month when the Indian government made amendments to the Maternity Act, in the sense that now women can get abortion done until 24th week of their pregnancies. All right, so more rights to women in that regard. However, in India, only 12% women right now, all right, married women have the independence to decide upon whether they want to have a baby or not. All right, so this is one of the problems that was highlighted in the report. Okay, so the name of the report, the topic, that is bodily autonomy, my body is my own, in itself is towards women independence and their right to talk about and decide on their own body. All right, the report each year is published by the UNFPA, which is a subsidiary organ of the UNGA, and it gets its mandate from the ECOSOC, one of the other member of the United Nations organization. There is some problem in the PPT here, which we will fix, all right, when you get it on the Google Drive. All right, I've noticed it here for the first time. Then this was the article that was published way early in April, when the idea of global minimum tax was mooted for the first time. All right, if you are one of the candidate who still has little idea of how it works, this article and editorial is important for you. You can understand it, what it means, all right, through a very easily written article written by Arun Kumar. All right, an idea on taxation that is worth a try. All right, this is global minimum corporate tax. The G7 agreed to it by October. G20 and the Organization for Economic, OECD, will also agree to it. All right, it calls for a minimum global taxation up to 10 to 15%. All right, this is to avoid the problem of base erosion and profit shifting, that multinational corporations register themselves in tax havens where there is no tax, so that whatever revenue or tax revenue governments are owned actually goes to these tax havens. All right, so to prevent a loss of revenue, this corporate minimum taxation has been talked about. All right, then April was also the month when US confirmed its final withdrawal from Afghanistan. That prior to the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, US will confirm its entire military is withdrawn from Afghanistan. All right. In this, so the war began in 2001, which was the marking of the global war on terror. However, in 20 years, US has been unable to completely defeat the Taliban. Alright, we have talked about it in the newspaper series, why that is the case. Okay, and this withdrawal confirms the US failure to actually meet. Alright, then April month was also the BIMSTEC ministerial meet. Alright, what is BIMSTEC? Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Corporations. Countries surrounding the Bay of Bengal. Alright, this was the 17th such meeting. In this meeting, it was called for, this was chaired by Sri Lanka, alright, held in virtual mode, but it endorsed the BIMSTEC master plan for transport connectivity, and our external affairs minister called for an early adoption of the BIMSTEC charter. The charter would mean that BIMSTEC countries will not waver beyond it. Alright, what are the countries who are members of BIMSTEC? Remember, at the 2019 swearing in ceremony of the Prime Minister, all the member states head of the state were invited. Alright, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, India, Myanmar, Vietnam and Sri Lanka. Alright, so all of them are here. It was signed at Bangkok in 1997, which created it. Alright, its secretariat, the secretariat of BIMSTEC is located in Bangladesh in Dhaka. Alright, the first summit was in Thailand. The current chair of it is Sri Lanka. Alright, then there was news from Cuba in the month of April. For the first time in 60 years, none of the Castros will be in power in Cuba. Alright, Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez will take over as the head of the Communist Party. Raul Castro, the brother of the then Fidel Castro, who had led the communist revolution in Cuba, a country so close to the US and yet remained a communist one. Alright, so the country is now transitioning from hard communism towards a more welcoming one, towards foreign capital. Alright, Raul Castro has stepped down. He has stated that because of its advanced age, it is not possible to handle. Cuban economy has also suffered severely because of COVID-19 and has been recording contraction and huge job losses. Alright, so this is the one news from Cuba. On that note, we'll end for the April month and talk about the rest of the news in the May segment. Thank you so much.